What's up, guys? Alright, so in this video, I'm going to be sharing with you a full conversational structure from open all the way to getting her on a date, giving you a clear idea of the things you can actually say when you approach a woman during the day and how you can have an amazing conversation so you'll know exactly where you are in the conversation, in the interaction, and exactly where to take it. So let's crack straight into it. So the first thing I want to talk about is opening. Okay, so the first thing I want to mention with opening, and this is really important, is that you want to pick something to open with that feels good for you. I remember for me, for ages, I would watch all of these YouTube videos that had really bad advice, all of this gamey, weird pickup stuff. And I'd go up there and I'd say things like, hey, 2 seconds. Or I'd say things like, hey, I know this is completely random, when for me it wasn't random at all. And I said all of these things that just did not feel true to me. They didn't feel real. And the women could sense that there was something not quite congruent with what I was expressing. So you have to pay attention to how do you feel when you're saying what you're saying. And so for me personally, one of the things that I like to open with that generally feels pretty good for me is just walking straight up and just being like, hey, I saw you and I saw you're cute and I wanted to meet you. For me, that feels good because it's usually just the truth of the situation. It's non-apologetic. I'm not like, hey, excuse me. It's just like, hey, I just saw you. I just saw you're cute. And you say, hey, and then there's a little bit of a break, right? So you get her attention with the hey, and then you deliver the rest of it. And you try to speak slow, right? Because a lot of guys, when they first walk up, they're like, hey, I saw you, I just thought, and it's like the girl hasn't even registered that you're there. So you want to just walk up like, hey, grab the attention, make the eye contact, and then slow. I saw you, and I thought you were cute, and I just wanted to come meet you, right? That kind of tonality, genuine kind of tonality. It has to be genuine. And women will sense if it feels fake or forced. Now, another thing that you can say is you can add, hey, I was just walking with my friends and I saw you and I thought you were cute and I wanted to meet you. The reason why adding that in there can be good is because women have a little bit of a concern when you first meet them that you're going to be like this really, just some random weird guy, right? And so when you say straight off the bat, like, hey, I was just with my friends and I saw you, it makes it a little bit more spontaneous, right? And it shows her like, okay, you're with some friends, you're a normal guy, whatever else. So it gives you a little bit of that straight off the bat. So that could be good to say as well. Or it could be as simple as, hey, I was just doing some shopping and I just saw you and you really caught my eye and I just had to come up and say hi. So things like that could just add some realness to your opener. So that can be good. Now, there's also indirect. So an example of that is like, let's say you're at Starbucks, you're waiting for your coffee, and a girl's got like some kind of pastry, in a paper bag or whatever, and she's waiting for a coffee. You could just be like, oh, what's that? That looks amazing. And yeah, so it's usually something very situational, something very in the moment when you're opening indirect. And so indirect can be really good because when you go direct, it's like you're kind of putting her on the spot and, either she likes you or she doesn't, Whereas indirect buys you more time for her to kind of get used to you. Now, I would say direct is good for a lot of guys to do because a lot of guys fall into kind of the nice guy category where they kind of, they're too afraid to express their intent and stuff like that. So it's good for them to be able to be direct with women. That's really good for them. Cool. Now, the other thing is statements of empathy. So, for example, if you startle her, just being able to, like, express that. Like, oh, I didn't mean to startle you, right? If she looks a little bit nervous, then just being able to say something like, hey, I know people don't really do this that often. Just some kind of statement of empathy, kind of attuning to where she's at, putting yourself in her shoes, right? That's very important. Cool. So, the transition, okay? So, a lot of guys get stuck after they first open, right? Like, hey, you're cute. And then straight up to the head. They don't know what to say next. And a lot of this comes from guys thinking they have to have something amazingly witty to say. You really don't. In fact, the first couple minutes of a cold approach interaction are really just about being able to relax and just stay grounded and just be fucking human, be genuine, right? Be real. Because that's what's going to allow her to feel like, okay, this guy's safe. She can trust you. You know, as men, it's like we have approach anxiety. Women have getting approached anxiety. You know, so if you can just be normal and human, then that's what you want. You don't have to say all this witty shit, right? It's just not true. But the best transitions are often going to be things that are just spontaneous. So for example, let's say you approached a girl, you walked up, you didn't quite get to see what she fully looks like. But then you sort of get in front, you see what she really looks like, and you realize, oh, she has this very kind of like Russian look to her. And that genuinely is something you notice spontaneously as you approach. Well, then you might be pulled to say something like, oh, are you Russian? You know, something like that, because that's something that you spontaneously notice. So pay attention to that. What's something that you notice straight away about her, or something about the situation you can comment on? Something that's very spontaneous, in the moment, situational. Those are often going to be the best transitions. Now, if that doesn't come to you, then there's nothing wrong with just being like, what is your name? Where are you from? That shit is fine. If you can say that shit while being relaxed, while being grounded, while being present, then it's going to go great. Okay? Cool. So this is what I call the SVGG connection model. So this is going to show you guys where you're at in your interactions, where to take it, so on and so forth. So it works off the premise that the more time you spend with someone and the more you deepen that connection, the more attracted they feel to you, the more that tension and that spark is created, the more they open up about themselves. So, for example, in the first 1 to 3 minutes, I say to keep it very surface level and situational. Now, the reason for this is, imagine you just walk up and you're like, hey, I saw you, I thought you were cute, wanted to meet you. And then straight after that, you're just like, so what do you do for fun? It's like, it's a little bit too much, right? It's a little bit too much straight away because you just met her. She's not going to just open up about herself straight away. But if you ask, what's your name? Where are you from? That's like, you know, you give that information to anyone, right? So it works off that kind of basis. Now, yeah, so the first 1 to 3 minutes is really just keeping it surface level, keeping it situational, okay? Then 3 to 6 minutes, you want to go into what I call vibing. And vibing is what kind of starts to build attraction. It builds some intrigue into who you are. It gets her thinking like, hey, who's this guy? He's a little bit fun. He's got a little bit of charm. He's got a bit of wit. He's not just like a boring dude like everyone else, you know? I like him, right? That's the vibing stage. So in this stage, you're flirting, essentially, to put it simply. It's just like, okay, you walk up. It's just about just being normal, grounding the nerves. And then after that, it's a little bit of flirting, okay? So how you do that, I'm going to go into that very soon. You know, things like cold reading, teasing, whole bunch of other things that I'm going to cover a little bit later on. I'm going to give you guys specifics for, you know, some examples of some kind of things that you can say. Don't copy the lines, but, you know, examples of some types of things you can say, right? I'm going to be giving you that and some powerful concepts. Okay, so after that stage of like vibing, when you're building that spark, building that chemistry, then it's about getting into the getting to know her period. And so the getting to know her period is really about, you know, just finding out more about her, opening up. You're opening up, she's opening up, that connection is starting to deepen. And then going deeper is bringing that even deeper. Because the way I see it, there's attraction and there's connection. And you want to have both. Some guys, all they do is connect. And they end up being kind of like the shoulder for women to cry on. And they constantly get friend zoned. And then there's other guys where it's like they just have attraction, but they don't have any connection. And because of this, they become kind of replaceable, not that memorable, whatever else. The guys who are the best with women have both dialed in, attraction and connection. And I think barely any dating coaches ever really talk about connection. They only ever talk about attraction. And yeah, the thing is, there is a lot of guys out there and you don't necessarily hear about it. It's like they're attractive, but they're really not that memorable to women. It's like they're fucking everywhere. Like they're not, they just don't really cut through and make a connection. They're just another like semi-attractive guy that wants to sleep with women. Like there's nothing special about them. Cool. So yeah, like I said, the more attracted and connected someone is, the more they're willing to invest. Now, another thing that is very important is you don't want to go into boring interview mode. And one way you can snap out of this is instead of just asking like question, you can snap out of that and turn your questions into assumptions. So for example, let's say that she's talking about studying or something like that. And, you know, you're wondering, okay, where does she study? Well, instead of just asking her, where do you study? You can turn that question into an assumption. So you can be like, let me guess, Melbourne Uni, right? If you're in Melbourne or whatever the big university is where you live. So you make a guess, you make an assumption. And the reason why this is a bit more polarizing is, you know, if you get it wrong, she's going to wonder why you think that. And that's going to make things a little interesting. And if you get it right, it's kind of impressive. So either way, it makes the conversation a little bit more interesting. So play around with that. Now, I want to say, remember, just see this framework as a framework that will help you just express yourself more authentically and have more enjoyable interactions. You know, drop this whole idea of trying to get the girl or saying the right thing to get the girl, right? That is neediness. You want to say the things that feel good for you. You want to express yourself in the way that feels good for you. So, the first 5 minutes are really just kind of like surface level, you know, and vibing. And there's a little bit of a back and forth, like kind of like in boxing, they talk about like jab, jab, hook. For example, when you're like, where are you from? And, you know, they're going to give you a response. And then back to that, you can be like, that's surprising. You gave me kind of like X vibes, okay, whatever vibes she gives you. So that's an example of how the two are kind of connected. It's like a lot of guys really overthink how you know, complex it like cold approach interactions are. They're really not that complex. It's just like, okay, at the start of the interaction, ask some basic questions, she gives you some answers, and then just kind of riff off the answers, right? Tease her a little bit, flirt with her, play around. And that's really like the first 5, could be even longer, minutes of the interaction, just kind of playing around, like asking basic questions, making some basic assumptions, playing around, teasing around. It's really not that complex. And then once you've got that down pat, it's just about going deeper. It really is simple. It doesn't have to be crazy. Cool. So surface level question examples, like, where are you from? What are you up to? What's your name? One funny one is like if she was on her phone before you walked up, you could be like, were you on Tinder before I walked up? That one can be pretty funny. Another one is like, are you from around here or are you traveling through? That could be good if you're traveling, because then she's going to ask you about travels and then you can talk about where you're from and what you're up to. And instantly the conversation is on like an interesting path. You know, traveling is great because like the moment you approach a woman, pretty much most of the conversations are going to start off with her being like, oh, you have an accent. Where are you from? And then from there, it's so much easier to have an interesting conversation from that, you know, so just a side note. Cool. And so there's something that I talk about called the association exercise. And so if you think about it this way, all conversations are made up of these associations. And it's just kind of like a big tree of these associations we draw. So for example, if I talk about being from Australia, people are going to draw that association of like, okay, wild animals and like scary spiders and snakes and crocodiles and like all these videos they see on the internet. So that's like a common association they draw when I tell them I'm from Australia. Okay. And so if I'm a very logical guy and let's say I'm talking to a girl and she draws that association when I tell her where I'm from, then, if I was just logical and boring, I'd be like, oh, yeah, no, it's pretty crazy. Yeah, there's a few crazy animals down there. Or I might say something like, oh, actually, yeah, it's not really true. It's like, yeah, most of Australia's population is just in cities and it's not really like that. You see how fucking boring that is? But instead, I could make it more emotional and I could draw like a more creative association and I could just be like, oh, it's okay. Like, I'll protect you. Something like that. Or, make some joke. One joke that I love to make about this is I'll tell them about something called drop bears. And drop bears are essentially, it's like a joke. Like, they don't actually exist. Drop bears are like this meme that's like koalas with like fangs and they drop out of trees and they like, jump on people. And it's like, I'll talk about, yeah, like it's crazy in Australia. Like, have you heard of drop bears? And they'll be like, what are drop bears? And then you pull out your phone and you show them a picture of like one of these like koalas with like these photoshopped fangs on and like instantly they laugh. So like that's something I'll do in that situation. That's an example of a more interesting association than what most guys do, right? Another example, this is just a more low-key one, but it's still a little bit more interesting, right? If she's talking about the gym, you could draw the association of like, oh, like all those videos on Facebook about like annoying influencers taking videos in the gym and stuff like that. And then she may give a response, and then you can talk about living in the moment and being present after that. Okay, that's another association. That's a little bit less logical and linear, but it still makes sense. Okay, so this is an exercise that I do with my students. It's called the association exercise. It's very powerful for getting guys to be less boring, logical, robotic, getting them to have better conversations. It's a very powerful exercise. Cool. So vibing examples. So yeah, a lot of guys' conversations are like literally this emotional flat line. Like there's like no spark in there. It's just boring as hell. So vibing is really like the opposite. It's about injecting a bit of playfulness, a bit of fun, a bit of humor, like evoking some pleasant feelings in the girl. Because if you think about it this way, a guy who's good at dating and attracting women is a guy who's able to walk up to a woman and shift her from whatever she was feeling, maybe it was like boredom, anxiety, whatever, to feeling good, to feeling relaxed, to feeling a bit of playfulness, to feeling a bit of fun, a bit of excitement. He makes her feel something. He has an emotional impact. And a big reason why a lot of guys, maybe aren't getting successful women, or maybe they have these interactions that just flatline and don't go anywhere, and they get these numbers that don't text them back, it's because they didn't make enough of an emotional impact. They didn't make a woman feel that spark. And so vibing allows you to do that. It allows you to create that spark, that attraction, that little bit of like, oh, okay, I like this guy. He made me feel a little bit of, something. And a side note, right? So many guys think that dating is all about, fucking looks, status, height, all this other shit. It's just like, at the end of the day, it's like, how did you make her feel? Did you give her that spark? Did you give her that feeling or not? It's all about how you make women feel. And that's why you could be a dude who isn't the best looking. You could even be a guy who has a dad bod, who's short, whatever, who can do well at cold approach. And I've seen that so many times. I've known so many guys who are like 5'6", not even that great looking, that get results with cold approach because of their charisma, because of how they make women feel, right? So don't believe all this bullshit that you're hearing on the internet. But anyway, a little bit of a side tangent, a little bit of a rant. But when you look at her, right? So I want to talk about cold reads. I talked about this before, but a lot of you guys might not know what the fuck that is. So a cold read is when you make like an assumption or you analyze something about a girl, okay? So for example, I could look at a girl and let's say she's wearing like all black. And let's say by this point in the interaction, I know she's like a lawyer. I could just stop and I could be like, wow, you're wearing all black and you're a lawyer. Like you'd have to be a Capricorn, okay? So that's like a cold read, making an assumption. And again, if I get it right, that's interesting. If I get it wrong, that's also interesting because she's like, oh, what made you think that? Or like, oh, that's really surprising. No one's ever said that. So it's a little bit more polarizing when you make those cold reads. And it's something that's very easy to do. So try it out for real. Now, another thing that's pretty easy to implement is just the concept of teasing, right? Which I'm sure you guys have heard about before, but you haven't really probably known exactly how to do it. But I'm going to give you a very simple way of viewing it, okay? So, let's say a girl says, like, oh, I'm meeting some friends at Starbucks soon. Well, we can tease her, and you could be like, wow, you're such a white girl, okay? And you say it with that playful kind of expression. You don't say it serious, like, oh my God, like, you're such a white girl. Like, no, you say it like playful, like, wow, you're such a white girl. You know, a little bit of a smile even, okay? And that's the whole thing with teasing. You're just playfully giving a girl shit. Another way of looking at it is it's kind of like playfully, negatively stereotyping her. So that's like a negative stereotype, right? A playful one, a silly one. The idea of like, okay, the basic white girl who like goes to Starbucks, wears Ugg boots, listens to Taylor Swift. That's like a certain negative stereotype. Another example, a girl says like, oh, she has to go to bed early. You can stereotype her as being like a grandma. You can be like, oh, okay, I see, you're like a grandma, like you're old. Like, I'll get you a cane. Yeah, it'll be okay. Like, you know, you can tease her like that. Tease her for being like a grandma. You know, another example, like the irresponsible party girl. That's like another stereotype. Or maybe like the too cool for school kind of girl. She's always talking about how everything's like jaded. You can tease her like that. Just any negative stereotype you can think about, you can use that to just playfully negatively stereotype her. Cool. Now, another very easy one to implement is push-pull. So you say something positive about her and then something more challenging. So, for example, you're cute, but, and then you throw in something else. So you could say, you're cute, but I think you're trouble, as an example. So just fill in the blanks with whatever feels good for you. Cool. So continued. So another thing is just making references to memes or things that are like commonly understood within culture. This can be good, just kind of lightens the mood, and it shows that you're a guy who kind of gets things, whatever. So, you know, just a basic example. She says she came back from the gym. You can just be like, oh, damn girl, getting those gains, you know, and you can gesture with your arm or something like that. But it's not like laugh out loud funny, but it's like it kind of lightens the mood a little bit. And yeah, it's like everyone understands that meme of like, okay, going to the gym and getting gains. You know what I mean? So it allows you to be a little bit playful. And again, it's something tangible that you guys can implement because you just think about, okay, again, drawing those associations, what's kind of like a meme that associates with what they're saying. Okay. Now, another thing is you probably notice, like, if I say something that's kind of teasing, flirting, vibing, sometimes I'll say, like, wow, oh my God, like at the start, because I found this is a way of getting out of that boring emotional flatline. Yeah, that can really help to make it a little bit more playful. So experiment with that. Like, wow, oh my God. You know, that kind of tonality, that kind of feeling to it. Okay. Now, another thing that's going to create a little bit of that spark, a little bit of that attraction, that chemistry, is showing some intent, right? Which pretty much just means if you're looking at a girl and there's something about her that you find attractive, just being able to like say that out loud is going to create a little bit of a spark, okay? If she's open to you, that is, okay? Now, a problem with a lot of guys doing this is they'll say things that are very like just canned, that they're not really feeling. So like, for example, they might say something like, oh, you have really nice eyes, when they weren't really thinking that when they were talking to the girl. Like that wasn't actually real. They're just, and that's what they call flattery, right? They're just giving like a compliment to try to get validation and approval, which is like very needy. But instead, it's just kind of like, oh, okay, if you're in an interaction and you're looking at her and there's just something about her that, you know, that you find very attractive and it's really grabbing you in that moment and you're feeling it, okay? When you say that out loud, it's going to have an impact on her, because women are turned on by feeling desired. Women, you know, that makes them attracted when they feel that, you know, your desire for them, if they're open to you. Now, another example is, you know, for me, often when I'm speaking to women, it's like, I will pay attention to their energy almost more than their actual looks. Like, it's literally gotten to a point where a woman could be quite physically attractive, but if she has a bad energy, I am just not that attracted to her. And so when a woman has a nice energy, that stands out to me. So if I feel that in the moment and I feel like, I might say it out loud. I'll be like, "Wow, I like your energy. You're very feminine." And again, when that is genuine, they feel that and they appreciate that. And it helps to create a spark. And really what this does is it just really helps to snap you out of that whole platonic emotional flat line. Okay, it shows us straight away, like, okay, this is a guy who is viewing me romantically, and kind of the boldness of being able to say some of these things turns her on a bit. Okay, so another thing is like light pullaways. So, for example, you could be like a Lakers fan and she could be like, she could support like the Knicks or something like that. And let's say these two teams are like at contention or something like that. You find out that she's a Knicks fan and you could, after she gives you that information, you could be like, "Oh, you go for the Knicks?" She'd be like, "Yeah, I go for the Knicks." I'd be like, okay, well, it was nice knowing you." And then just like start like pretending to walk away. Okay, that can be really good. And then, you come back. So that's just like another way that you can kind of play around a little bit. Now, another thing is exaggeration. Okay, this is a great concept, very powerful. And so pretty much this just means just taking whatever she said to the absolute extreme. Okay, so if a girl says something like, "I love Australia, can I come?" Then I could just say something playfully and be like, "Yeah, I'll put you in my suitcase." So I'm taking that to the extreme. Like, I'm making it ridiculous. Another example, I mean, this is more for bars, not really daytime cold approach, but you can take the same sort of concept. It's like, if she's at a bar and she tells you that she's not drinking tonight or something like that, you can say something in return like, "Good, I won't have to like carry you out of the venue later." Okay, so you're taking that to the extreme. That's what exaggeration is. Another thing you can do is what I call sarcastic agreeance / non-agreeance. So, for example, girls will often test you with this shit. And you guys have probably had this before, where they're just like, "Do you say that to every girl?" Okay? And what you can do in response to that is you can say in this kind of like sarcastic tone, you can be like, "Nah, I'm too shy for that." Okay? So that's like sarcasm, right? You're saying it in a confident voice, be like, "Nah, I'm too shy." You're not explaining yourself either, which is what makes that work. But it's like that sarcastically not agreeing. And you can sarcastically agree too, like, "Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, sure." Right? So that can add a little bit of tension. But overall, guys, just like don't exchange facts and be a logical robot. Like, play around with her. It's a dance, okay? Cool. So the first 5 minutes, the number is always a backup plan. Okay, the real goal is you want to stay in there for as long as possible until she clearly can't stay, and then you want to get a number and tell her you have to go. Okay, that's really important. So many guys just walk around and they just try to get a number after the first like minute or something just because they're nervous, and it's not. A lot of the time, it's not going to be enough time to really create that connection, that impact to make her go like, "Okay, I want to see this guy again." So your first goal should always be to just stay in there and take her on an instant date. Instant dates are fucking amazing. That's one of my favorite things about cold approach, especially, during the day. It's just you go out, you see a woman, you say hi, you have an interaction, and then you're like, "Hey, let's grab a drink." Next minute, you're on an instant date. No texting back and forth, no planning shit. Like, it's honestly the most amazing way to date. Like, it's amazing. It's just straight to the point. Now, one thing with daytime cold approach interactions is most guys say too much out of nerves. Okay, they go up there and they're like, "Blah, blah, 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 blah," because there's so many nerves going on. So what you want to do instead is you want to say less and you want to relax and slow it down. Okay, cool. So another thing is, like I said, most of the time in the first 5 minutes, you just want to keep it to surface level questions and assumptions. For example, if you ask a girl in the first minute, something like, "So what do you do for fun?" That's too much in the first minute, like I said at the start. So you want to keep it more surface level in the first couple minutes, then transition to vibing. Cool. So another thing that's very important is you want to make it clear to her what you're up to right now. Especially if it's a walking set. So let's say, she's walking around like the main part of the city and she's just walking around, but then she's walking back to her apartment. Of course, in a situation like that, but just in general, you kind of need to ask her like, oh, okay, so what direction are you going? Okay, you're going this direction. Cool. Yeah, no, I got to do some shopping soon, but I'll walk with you this way for a bit and we can get to know each other or something like that. Okay. So you're letting her know what you're up to. You're not just like randomly talking to her and then she's wondering in the back of her mind, okay, is this guy following me? Like, what's the deal? Okay. Because that's the thing. It's like, even though you're a normal fucking guy, she doesn't know that. That's the thing you got to take into account. Okay. So you got to be aware of that. Cool. So leading. So women are going to be doing certain things when you meet them. And what you're essentially doing is you're snapping them out of that and bringing them into spending time with you. So you have to lead that. And even if you're both not doing anything, like even if you're both just like walking around, you still want to lead in the sense of, okay, let's go this way. Because it helps to create that masculine feminine polarity. Something else you can experiment with is if you feel that she's connected, if you feel like there's some chemistry, you can actually just say something like, wait, let's stop for a sec. And you say something like, I wanted to see what color your eyes are. Or maybe she has a certain t-shirt or something like that. Like, I want to see what your t-shirt says. Or like, you just say like, I wanted to see what you look like for real. Or like, whatever. Or you could just stop. You could stop and she could stop. If you feel like there's this, connection and attraction that's there, then doing that will help you to amplify it, That said, only experiment with that if you really feel like there's a good level of interest and attraction there. Cool. So when to go for the instant date? So it's going to be different for every woman, but you want to go for it once you sense that she feels connected and interested. Okay. So usually it takes 5 to 10 minutes, sometimes take more, sometimes less. So you really got to feel that out. So how do you go for the instant date? Okay, so a lot of guys think it's way more complicated than it needs to be, but it's just like, what are you up to right now? And then she'll tell you, and then from there, you just say simply like, we should grab a drink, we should grab a juice, coffee, whatever. Like, if you ask, what are you up to? Ideally, she'll say like, oh, not much. And then you're just like, cool, let's grab a drink. Just like that. And then she's probably going to be like, oh, like, you mean now? And then it's just like, you just remain certain, remain relaxed, and you're just like, yeah. And then you just start walking, and she'll walk with you. Simple as that. But the key here is certainty, conviction, okay? Women cue off how you feel about what you're doing. So if you feel uncertain about what you're doing, she's going to feel more uncertain. But if you feel a sense of conviction in what you're doing, like it's normal, confident, then she cues off that, and it puts her at ease about the situation. So conviction, confidence, is very important. And it genuinely is something that, in a certain sense, is very normal and natural. It's like, okay, you see a girl, you talk to a girl, it's like, yeah, fucking get a coffee, get to know each other. Like, that's pretty normal. Cool. So getting to know her. So this usually really kicks off like when you're actually on the date, when you've kind of planted yourself, or like beyond the first 5 minutes or so of interacting. Whenever it doesn't feel like too much. But this is the point in which you start having the mindset of finding out whether she has the things that you like in a woman. So here's an example of some of the things I look for in a woman. So, I like women who are into healing, psychology, spirituality. I like women who are musical, because I'm very into music. And I like women who are supportive of my purpose and what I do. And so how would I find out whether a woman has those qualities? So for one, I could ask her, do you meditate? And then I'm going to get an answer from that, okay? And that's a little bit better than asking, are you into spirituality, right? Because people who generally are, like, everyone's spiritual. But anyway, that's a side tangent. Okay, the second one, like, you give me the vibe you listen to X type of music. So again, kind of like an assumption, cold read type of thing. Shaking it up, not just asking it as a question. You give me the vibe you listen to techno or something like that. And then, you'll find out from that assumption where she's at. In terms of purpose and stuff like that, if I just talk about what I do, then I'm gonna get an idea of how she feels about it and whether she's the kind of person who's supportive of, you know, men who run businesses and stuff like that. And if I wanted to bring that up in other ways, then I could be like, okay, like, what do you do? Like, are you passionate about that and stuff like that, and go down that kind of path and stuff like that. So this is, yeah, again, an exercise that I do with my students. I get them to, kind of find this fusion of like, okay, writing out things about themselves. I call it their truths, like being able to like journal about their truths, getting to know themselves better, but then also reverse engineering that and then thinking, okay, well, how can I actually put that into a conversation? So it's like this real good balance of like honesty, but then also having a little bit of skill in how you're communicating, which, I honestly don't see out there at all among any other coaches. I think every coach, it's kind of like they fall on two lines of the spectrum. They're either like a bunch of just purely, routine, scripted, canned stuff, or they're kind of down the path of just like throwing guys completely in the deep and just being like, okay, just, feel your body, be present, just say whatever. And, embodiment, presence, very powerful, but also, it can help to have some idea of some things you can actually say and to be skillful in some sense about the way you communicate. So it's really finding this balance. And I feel like this method really helps a lot. And the reason why it's so powerful to, follow that curiosity of what you really look for in a woman and what you like, and to ask her these questions, is it shows that you're a man who dates from a place of abundance, that you have options. Because a lot of guys are just trying to sleep with women. That's it. They don't care about anything else. And it's just like they don't have like real standards. They just kind of like, like if a girl's like a certain level of attractiveness, that's like enough for them. They don't actually care about who they are as a person. And that's pretty uninteresting to a lot of women, when they can sense a guy doesn't actually care about who they are as a person. So when you actually do care about who she is as a person, you're trying to find that out, and you have certain things you like in a woman, it's a very, high status behavior in a sense, like in a real sense. Shows that you're a man who has options, who dates from a place of abundance. Cool. So this is also about her getting to know you. So you want to talk about the things that you're passionate about, the things that you care about. And a lot of guys are concerned that if they talk about the things they're passionate about, that women aren't going to be interested in that. But it's just not true. It's like, she'll appreciate the passion, even if she doesn't necessarily fully understand what you're talking about. She will appreciate that you're passionate about it, and that passion within you is attractive. Okay, so that's what really matters. And saying the things that women want to hear and just constantly supplicating, saying what they want to hear, is unattractive, because deep down they can sense that you don't have, that you're so attached to getting her approval that you're just saying whatever you think that she wants to hear. You're not actually expressing who you truly are. And that's very unattractive to women. And, at the end of the day, if she doesn't vibe with what you're talking about, then she's just not the wrong girl for you. Straight up, she's not the right girl for you. Cool. Now, another thing I want to talk about is the idea of, like, opening up. Okay, so a lot of guys, if they get a basic question, like, have you traveled? They might just say something like, yeah, I have. Or like, oh, yeah, I've traveled a bit. That's it. They don't really give a girl much. But if a girl asks you a basic question, like, have you traveled? Give her a little bit more, okay? Like, yeah, I love traveling. I recently went to X, Y, and Z. Yeah, it was, like, amazing, blah, blah, blah. So giving her a bit more. It doesn't mean you have to be, like, just really talking too much. But it's, like, opening it up a bit, okay? Cool. So going deeper. Okay, so a very powerful concept is the concept of following your natural curiosity about her as a human being. So, if you can practice this with anyone. It doesn't just have to be women. The next time you're talking to a friend, anyone, just see if you can follow this intuitive sense of, what do you really want to know about them? Like, look at them, be present with them, and ask yourself, what do I really want to know about this human being? Like what, and sometimes the questions that you may ask, you may feel like, shit, that might be a little bit much, you know what I mean? Or like maybe that's a little too deep. But it's like if you've gotten to this point, like I said, if you've so go into the deeper, this is probably like, 20 minutes into an interaction or something like that. If you've gotten to this point, you'd be surprised. You can connect quite deeply and ask some pretty deep things. Even after only speaking with someone for like half an hour, if you have, the kind of energy where you're able to be, where people feel relaxed around you, where you're genuine, you'd be surprised at how quickly you can start going deeper with someone. And when you start asking these questions that you're naturally curious about, it's like, again, this makes you stand out from all those other guys that lack any kind of depth, that just are an emotional, like an emotional 2 out of 10 that just, just don't care about who they are as a person. They just want to sleep with them. That's it. So you separate yourself from these boring guys and you really stand out when you start doing this. So like an example of a question that's a little bit deeper is like, if you were to ask her, when was your last relationship? So, for me, generally speaking, that might be something that I tend to ask. Just my natural curiosity goes there because I'm quite interested in dating and relationships. And I also think it shows you a lot about the girl. So, it can be an interesting topic to talk about, but that's an example of a topic where, you'd probably want to be with someone for like 20 minutes before asking something like that. So just to drive home earlier, that point that I'm talking about. So how to move things forward. So a lot of guys think this is way more complicated than it needs to be. But at a certain point, if you feel like, okay, there's a good spark here, there's a good amount of connection, and you want to move things forward, you can just simply say, do you like wine? And then she's going to give you a response. And then from there, you can just say, we should split a bottle together later. Okay, so you plant that seed of splitting a bottle of wine together later, right? Or you can even say, like, we split a bottle together later at my place, if you want to be even more direct, okay? Just put it out there, okay? And, or you can, if you don't drink, you can be like, invite her back to watch something. Like, have you seen X, Y, and Z TV show? She says no, then be like, oh my God, you haven't seen it. We should watch it together later. Okay, so dropping that seed, okay? And now you could just be completely direct and just be like, I'm enjoying spending time with you. We should continue this back at my place. You can say that. However, I would say, just attuning to where she's at. A lot of women have a concern that you're just going to take them back to your place and just like jump on them, So you want to ease that pressure. It can be good to say, do you like wine? Invite them back to watch something, because it makes it clear that you're not just purely expecting that. That's why it's good to say those kinds of things. And now, okay, so you drop the seed of doing that. Now you might have to bring it up a second time, or at a certain point, if there's really, a great vibe, you simply, get the check, whatever you pay, and then you get up and you're just like, okay, let's go. And you go from there. And yeah, but you want to make it clear. You want to make it clear what you want to do, and you're going to get a certain response from her. Like if you're like, we should split a bottle together at my place later. She's either going to be like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. Or she might be a little bit like, oh, yeah, maybe, or she'll be straight up no. But at least you'll find out where you're at. And the thing is with, going through things like this, I always say to guys, if there's something that you want to go for, like whether it's like you genuinely really want to kiss her, you genuinely want to take her back to your place, you genuinely want to get physical, if you don't do it, she's going to sense that you're being timid, right? But if you genuinely don't want to do it and you don't really care, then that's fine too. Maybe you want to take things a bit slower and that's genuinely what you want to do. But whatever way, it's just about being true to yourself and what you genuinely want and not acting from a place of fear. That's the biggest thing. Being able to fully own what you want, owning your reality. That's very important. Okay. Now, the other thing is, of course, at this stage too, and throughout, remaining certain, remaining calm. You know, she may ask you questions like maybe she's like on the maybe side of the spectrum and she has a few concerns. She's like, but what if you're a serial killer? You know, you just like remain certain, remain calm, and you can just joke around. You can be like, oh, it's okay. I gave up serial killing last week. You know, just something like that. And then she's going to laugh. But it's like, you know, not being too thrown off by her uncertainty, her nerves, just, you know, having your perspective, your frame of, okay, this is something normal, you know, because it is fucking normal. It's like, it's what a man and a woman do when they're attracted to one another. So you just, you know, that's your frame. This is normal, whatever. And if she's not down, she's not down, and that's fine. And you know, you don't be pushy about it, okay? But you just put it out there, and you just remain. Your frame is like, yeah, this is normal. This is something I want. And if you're not down, you're not down. Whatever. That's the kind of mindset you want to have. So for those of you who have really resonated with what I've been talking about, and you know, you've tried yourself going out doing cold approach, you've watched a bunch of YouTube videos, but you know, you're either in two categories. You haven't really actually went out there and done cold approach, or you barely ever do it, or maybe you're a guy who's went out there and done it a bit, but you're just like not really doing that well. So for either of you, this is something that you're gonna want to hear about. So what I do with men is very different, right? I do 12 one-on-one virtual approaching sessions. Now, what does that mean? That means I go out for an hour and a half with my students while we're on the call, and I guide them through facing their social fears. Not just with women, I warm them up. I get them to say highs, ask people for the time, really warm themselves up, open themselves socially so they can get to a point where they see a cute woman and they go up and they say hi. And then once you're at that point where you're like approaching women, you know, during these calls, I'll be able to actually hear your interactions, right? Because you've got like an ear pod in, I can hear what you're doing, okay? And I give you feedback on where you're going wrong, and I tell you exactly what you need to do to improve. Because so many guys out there are trying to self-medicate. They're trying to watch all these YouTube videos, take all these different concepts, and honestly, a lot of these YouTube videos have terrible advice, and they're leading these guys in the wrong direction. Like I said, that was what happened with me. I took on this terrible advice and said all these random things that didn't feel true to me, and it produced bad results. So there's a lot of bad advice out there, and a lot of guys are trying to self-medicate with this advice, and they're just getting worse and worse, or like their results aren't improving because they don't know what their real problem is. They're not able to diagnose their problem properly because they're not getting that feedback externally from someone else who's experienced, who's been through this, who's gotten results. They don't have that real feedback on what they're doing. So this is a game changer. I would say one of the biggest reasons why guys will never date their ideal woman is a lack of feedback. The other reason is a lack of actually just fucking going out there and doing the thing. And that's why this program is very action orientated, because so many guys just stay like watching YouTube videos, mentally masturbating, never actually doing anything about it. And the thing with cold approach is the more you actually go out there and you face social pressure, you face social tension, the more your confidence grows and the more of that natural charisma actually starts to come out. So going out there consistently and facing the social pressure is what gets you good. And so that's why we do 12 online virtual approaching sessions going through all of that. Super important. And alongside the virtual approaching sessions, I also do model work. So which means over Zoom, you do a model work session with me and one of my models. So you interact with them and I give you feedback on all the things you're doing to break tension. So whether it's like breaking eye contact, whether it's like looking down, whether it's like fidgeting, there's all these little things that men do, all these little subconscious little micro expressions or things within their body language that turn women off and push women away. And so I make men aware of all of these things that they're doing subconsciously that they weren't aware of. And I guide them through dropping them one by one. And then they start tapping into their naturally authentic, attractive self through doing this. And then after that, we also do weekly group calls where, Q&A style, everyone comes to me with their questions and I give them answers. And then you also have around the clock access over Messenger, and I give people homework to do during the week. And then I get them to, send me voice messages every day or two and, let me fill me in on what they're doing. So we do those check-ins, okay, which is very powerful. And you also get lifelong access to the mastermind group as well. So that's the full 12-week online program. And I also have the guarantee with all of this that if you don't get at least 3 dates with your ideal woman by the end of the 12 weeks, I keep coaching you for free until you do. That's my guarantee, and that's how certain I am about this process. Because there's no way that you can do 12 virtual approaching sessions with me going out there for real over 12 weeks and not dramatically improve. Okay? It just works. So here's some recent results. So Ben, he's been on 4 dates since starting this program at the start of the year. He's meeting women in very natural ways, like at grocery stores and stuff like that. He actually has a message here where he talks about, being out with his friends at a bar and how, like, he saw a cute girl. He went up, he started talking, and, they start making out. And the friends are just like, whoa, who is this Ben? Like, who is this guy? Like, barely even recognizing him. And so that's the shift you can make when you really face a lot of social pressure. Cool. So Victor, he went from, he doesn't even speak English, like barely speaks English, but he's getting dates through the program. So Rohit, he's getting numbers and dates with the women he wants, and he's not letting any bullshit limiting beliefs about race affect him. Kareem, so he's dating women he didn't even think were possible to date. In this message, he's talking about he went on a date with a beautiful Swiss lawyer who's also into meditation. The other day, he told me he went on a date with a girl who was a model who was into programming. A lot of guys don't even they don't even think these women really exist, but they do. You just got to meet them during the day, right? You're not often going to find these women at nightclubs. And a lot of the most physically attractive, most emotionally healthy women aren't on dating apps nowadays. And there's this huge barrier of entry where, you do have to be a certain level in terms of looks to even match with girls who are cute, even if you have really good photos, because women judge you a lot more on your looks on dating apps than they do when they meet you in person. So that's something very important to consider. I genuinely believe that if men don't have the ability to cold approach women during the day, they are severely limiting their dating results. And the probability of them settling with a woman who is, far less attractive, far less interesting, far less emotionally healthy than she could be. The chances of that happening are way higher if they're using, if they're meeting women at nightclubs, if they're meeting women at only on dating apps, or they're limited to social circle and work and stuff like that. So, if they don't have the ability to just meet cute women during the day, it's makes dating very scarce for a lot of guys. But when you can actually master this, it opens up a whole world of opportunity with women, a whole world of women who are way more physically attractive, way more emotionally healthy. There is no barrier to meeting these women. You go up, you make them feel good, you share good energy, you create a spark, you make a connection, and suddenly, you can bring them into your life. And that's what's amazing about cold approach. And this is why I love doing this process with men. Not only that, but it makes men better men. It grows them. It grows their confidence. It makes them better. It gives them courage. I know for me, going out there, I would always feel like there was a wall between me and them. You know what I mean? Like a wall of resistance. It was something I wanted to do, but I couldn't do. And I knew it would unlock, higher quality women. It would, but bigger than that, it annoyed me that there was something that I wanted to do that I couldn't do because of this fear. And for me, it was only when I actually had a mentor and I worked one-on-one with them and I got the accountability that I actually improved in this area of my life. And so I think that one-on-one accountability is huge, and that's why I do that. A lot of coaches are just throwing men in these big groups. They don't really care about the dudes they're working with. They don't give them that one-on-one time and attention. You know, they're just another number to them. And that's why these guys aren't getting the kind of results, because they're not getting that proper accountability to really go out there and take action. And that's what it's all about. Having a coach that holds you accountable to actually taking action, to facing those fears, who cares, who can give you proper feedback on what you're doing wrong and how to improve. And that's how you fast track this process. Accountability, feedback, and having the right framework. That's what you need. So if you're interested in working with me, here's how you contact me. So you can go to my Instagram, Hudson Greening Mentoring, or you can go to my Facebook and just type in Hudson Greening, and you can DM me Perfect10. Or you can shoot me an email at yourperfect10dating@gmail.com. So I hope you guys have found this useful. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.